What are 3 things that hinder your prayer?
Oh, 3 things that hinder my prayer. Lack of belief. If you say, well, I'm going to pray, but it won't help, then don't pray, because it won't help. You know what I mean? Prayer is about faith. I think that we are lulled to sleep into thinking that prayer is our only response. And I think usually in Scripture, it's prayer plus action. Jericho, it's prayer plus action. They picked up the ark and they started walking in the river when it's still at flood stage, but when their feet touched the water, it went back and it's dry ground and they crossed on dry ground. It's prayer plus action. But also, I have a whole section on prayer hindrances. Did you know that not being concerned for the poor hinders your prayers? Did you know that not honoring your spouse hinders your prayers? I knew a guy when I was growing up. He had 3 kids, and in his living room, he had that. Remember the continuous forms paper that used to do a long banner? Mm-hmm. He had one of those above his couch, and it said, "Dinner is at 6 o'clock, not 5:59 and not 6:01." He was king of his house, and everybody knew it. And all 3 of his kids left the Lord. He's praying for them every day. I can tell you, his prayers are being hindered because of the way he treats his wife.
What about tithing?
I think tithing hinders your prayers. It's one of the things on my list. Malachi 3 starts by saying, "I'm the Lord and I don't change." In other words, forget the fact this is Old Testament. In fact, Jesus didn't lower the bar anyway. In adultery, you had to commit it in the Old Testament. New Testament, you just got to think it, and you're guilty of it. So Jesus raised the bar. But Malachi 3 says, if you're not tithing, you're robbing me. And that worries me because the average giving in churches in America is 2.5%. We could actually quadruple our budgets if everybody tithed. So it's on us, you know. And then Malachi 3 is the only place in the whole Bible where God says, "Test me in this, and I'll open the windows of heaven for you." In fact, I've got a lesson on this I give at churches when they're giving this down. And I got a book I recommend called The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn, and I teach this lesson. And I told what I just said to you. If you're not giving 10%, you got God's curse on you. So you got a choice. You live on 90% of what you make with God's blessing, or 100% of what you make with God's curse. I'll take the 90 with God's blessing every day. But the part about test me in this, and I'll open the windows of heaven for you. 6 months after I teach that lesson, everywhere I've taught it, somebody has called me and said, "I want you to know something, Steve. When you taught that lesson, I could not afford to tithe. But because you brought up that God said, 'Test me, and I'll open heaven for you,' I went ahead." In other words, when I say I can't afford to tithe, if I'd written my tithe check, I couldn't pay all my bills. It was that close, you know. So, I mean, I get that. So 6 months later, they called and they said, so what I did, I on faith, I wrote my tithe check first. And I said, "What happened?" They said, "Got a raise." You're right. God means what he says. His word's still powerful. Got a raise. Now I can afford to tithe.